Mark loved tinkering. Anything broken, he could usually fix. Toasters, lamps, even the grumpy old lawnmower next door, Mark had a knack for making things work again. But his real passion was bicycles. He knew every nut, bolt, and spoke. He could true a wobbly wheel with his eyes closed and make a rusty chain sing like new. In their small town, Mark was known as the bike whisperer. Kids brought him their mangled BMX bikes after daring jumps gone wrong. Grown-ups asked him to tune up their vintage cruisers for leisurely rides along the river. He never charged much, happy just to see things rolling smoothly again. His own garage was a testament to his love, filled with tools, spare parts, and the comforting scent of oil and rubber. He even had a special stand just for bike repairs, a gift from his grandpa who had taught him everything he knew. He wasn't just good at fixing bikes, he understood them. He knew how important they were to people. A bike wasn't just a machine, it was freedom, adventure, and a way to explore the world. And Mark was happy to help people experience that feeling. He spent hours in his garage, not because he had to, but because he loved it. The rhythmic whir of the chain, the satisfying click of the gears, it was his happy place. He was always ready to lend a hand, or a wrench, to anyone in need. And then there was Sarah. Sarah was different. Mark had known Sarah since she was a little girl, always climbing trees and scraping her knees. He remembered patching up her tricycle tires when she was barely tall enough to reach the pedals. Sarah was sunshine and laughter wrapped in a mischievous grin. She had a way of making even the most mundane tasks feel like an adventure. She was known for her playful spirit. She loved to tease and joke around, but always in a friendly way. Never mean, just spirited. She was like a little sister to him, always popping up when he least expected it, ready with a funny story or a silly question. Mark had always admired her energy and enthusiasm. While he was content tinkering in his garage, Sarah was out exploring, always seeking new experiences. She played every sport, joined every club, and seemed to know everyone in town. She was a whirlwind of activity, a constant source of amusement and, sometimes, a little bit of exasperation. He never thought of her as anything other than a friend, a kid he'd known forever. But now, Sarah was different. She was growing up. He noticed it more and more, the way she carried herself, the way she looked at him. He just brushed it off, thinking he was imagining things. After all, she was still just Sarah, the girl who used to chase butterflies in his backyard. Or so he thought. So, when Sarah's bike chain snapped, it wasn't a surprise that she immediately thought of Mark. She knew he was the best person to fix it, probably the only person she trusted enough to touch her beloved blue bicycle. It was a gift from her parents, and she loved it more than almost anything. She could have taken it to a real bike shop, of course, but that felt impersonal. Plus, she liked any excuse to see Mark. She knew he would do a better job, and she also knew he wouldn't charge her an arm and a leg. More importantly, she enjoyed his company. She walked the bike the few blocks to Mark's house, the broken chain clanking against the frame with every step. She found him in his garage, surrounded by his usual collection of tools and bike parts. He was humming softly to himself as he worked on a vintage road bike, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Mark," she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the garage. He looked up, a smile spreading across his face when he saw her. "My bike chain broke," she said, stating the obvious. "I was hoping you could work your magic." She leaned the bike against the wall, a hopeful expression on her face. "You're the only one I trust to fix her." Mark chuckled. "Of course, Sarah. Let's take a look." He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over to examine the damage. He knew he wouldn't be able to say no to her, even if he wanted to. And secretly, he didn't want to. Mark grinned, already planning his approach. "Broken chains are no match for me," he declared playfully. He loved the challenge of fixing things, especially when it came to bikes. And helping Sarah was always a bonus. He grabbed his toolbox and carefully inspected the chain. "Looks like a clean break," he said, pointing to the severed links. "Easy fix." I probably have a spare chain that will work perfectly. He rummaged through his collection of bike parts, pulling out a shiny new chain. Yep, this should do the trick. He enjoyed these little projects. It gave him a chance to use his skills and feel useful. Plus, Sarah always made it fun. She had a way of turning even the most mundane tasks into an adventure. He liked the way she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled when she was excited. He found himself looking forward to these moments, these opportunities to spend time with her. "All right, let's get to work," he said, a smile in his voice. He positioned the bike on his repair stand, making sure it was secure. He grabbed his tools and began to carefully remove the broken chain. He worked quickly and efficiently, his hands moving with practiced ease. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was determined to get Sarah's bike back on the road as soon as possible. He wanted to see her smile, to see her riding off into the sunset, happy and free. That was all the reward he needed. The afternoon sun streamed into Sarah's driveway, casting long shadows across the pavement. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the nearby trees, creating a peaceful and relaxed atmosphere. It was the kind of day that made you want to be outside, enjoying the fresh air and sunshine. Mark knelt beside Sarah's bike, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked on the chain. His hands were covered in grease, but he didn't seem to mind. He was completely focused on the task at hand, determined to get the job done right. The sounds of birds chirping and children playing in the distance filled the air, creating a pleasant backdrop to the scene. Sarah sat on the steps of her porch, watching Mark intently. She admired his dedication and his skill. She also liked the way he looked when he was concentrating, his brow furrowed and his lips slightly pursed. She knew he was good at what he did, and she appreciated his willingness to help her out. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, a sweet and intoxicating scent that filled Sarah's senses. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the feeling of the warm sun on her skin. It was a perfect day, a perfect setting, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment wash over her. She glanced at Mark, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She had a feeling this afternoon was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Mark, absorbed in his work, was carefully threading the new chain through the gears. He was so focused that he barely noticed Sarah getting up and walking towards him. He could hear the soft crunch of her sneakers on the driveway, but he didn't look up. He was determined to get this chain back on perfectly. Suddenly, Sarah was right next to him, leaning over his shoulder, way too close for comfort. He could smell her perfume, a light and floral scent that was both familiar and strangely new. He tried to ignore the distraction and keep his focus on the task at hand, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Then, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chirping of the birds, "I was kinda hoping for a ride from you instead." Mark froze. His hands stopped moving, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. He slowly looked up, his eyes meeting Sarah's. He saw a playful grin on her face, a mischievous glint in her eyes that he had never noticed before. "I just turned 18, she added, her voice soft but clear. The wrench slipped from Mark's grasp, clattering loudly against the concrete. The sound seemed deafening in the otherwise peaceful afternoon. He stared at Sarah, his mouth agape, completely and utterly speechless. The world around him seemed to fade away, leaving only him and Sarah, and the shocking realization of what she had just said. The clatter of the wrench echoed in Mark's ears, amplifying his already heightened state of shock. He stared at Sarah, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what she had just said. He felt a blush creeping up his neck and onto his cheeks. He wasn't sure what to say, what to do. He had never imagined Sarah, his Sarah, saying something like that. His heart pounded in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. He suddenly felt very aware of the grease on his hands, the sweat on his brow, the awkwardness of the situation. He stammered, trying to find the right words, but nothing came out. He felt like a deer caught in headlights, frozen and helpless. He looked at Sarah's face, searching for any sign that she was joking, that this was just another one of her playful teases. But her grin was different this time, more knowing, more mature. It was then that the full weight of her words hit him. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was 18. An adult. He looked down at the dropped wrench, then back up at Sarah, his eyes wide with disbelief. He just couldn't wrap his head around it. The Sarah he knew, the Sarah he had always seen as a kid sister, was suddenly a woman. And she was standing right in front of him, suggesting something. He didn't know what to do with this new information. He felt completely overwhelmed. Suddenly, images flooded Mark's mind. He remembered Sarah with pigtails, riding her tricycle down the sidewalk, her training wheels wobbling precariously. He remembered teaching her how to ride her two-wheeler, running alongside her, holding onto the seat until she found her balance. He remembered bandaging her scraped knees after she fell while trying to climb a tree. He remembered birthday parties with balloons and cake, and her gap-toothed grin as she blew out the candles. He remembered her dressing up in his mom's old clothes, pretending to be a princess. He remembered all the times he had babysat her, reading her bedtime stories and tucking her into bed. He had always seen her as a kid, a little sister, someone to protect and look after. The age difference, though only a few years, had always seemed vast, insurmountable. He was in high school when she was in elementary school. He was getting his driver's license when she was learning to ride a bike. They were in different worlds, different stages of life. Now, she was 18. And suddenly, all those memories felt different. He realized that he had been so focused on seeing her as a kid that he had completely missed her growing up. He felt a pang of guilt, a sense of having been oblivious to something important. He wondered if he had been too caught up in his own life to notice the changes in hers. He knew that he needed time to process everything, to figure out what this meant, and to understand how he truly felt. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him, confusion, surprise, a hint of something else he couldn't quite name. He looked at Sarah, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of amusement and anticipation, and he realized that he had to say something, anything to break the awkward silence. "Sarah," he began, his voice a little shaky, I don't know what to say." He paused, searching for the right words. "I've always thought of you as a friend. A little sister, almost." He cringed inwardly, realizing how lame that sounded. He felt like he was walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing and ruining their friendship. He didn't want to hurt her feelings, but he also didn't want to lead her on. He just needed time to figure out how he felt, to reconcile the image of the little girl he had always known with the young woman standing before him. I need some time to think about this," he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked at Sarah, hoping she would understand. He saw a flicker of disappointment in her eyes, but also a hint of understanding. He knew that he had handled the situation badly, but he just didn't know what else to do. He needed space, time to process everything, before he could even begin to consider what this might mean for their future. Sarah's playful grin softened. "Hey, relax," she said, her voice gentle. "I was just kidding." "Sort of." She shrugged, a sheepish look on her face. "I just wanted to see your reaction." She reached down and picked up the wrench, handing it back to Mark. "Don't worry, I don't expect anything from you. I know you've always seen me as a kid." She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face. "But I'm not a kid anymore, Mark. And I just wanted you to know that." She stepped back, giving him some space. "Anyway," she said, her voice regaining its usual lightness, "thanks for fixing my bike. I really appreciate it." She winked. "Maybe we can go for a ride sometime, as friends, of course." Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been so worried about hurting her feelings or leading her on, but it seemed like she understood. He still needed time to process everything, but at least the immediate tension had been diffused. He managed a weak smile. "Yeah, as friends," he echoed, feeling a little less awkward. He picked up the chain and started working on the bike again, his hands moving with a renewed sense of purpose. He still had a bike to fix, and a lot to think about. But for now, at least, the situation was manageable. A chuckle escaped Mark's lips, a nervous sound that broke the remaining tension. "Yeah, well, you definitely got my reaction," he admitted, shaking his head. He looked at Sarah, and a genuine smile spread across his face. He appreciated her honesty, her playful spirit, and her willingness to forgive his awkwardness. Okay, he said, "bike ride as friends. But first, let's get this chain fixed properly." He focused his attention back on the bike, his hands moving with renewed confidence. He reconnected the chain, adjusted the gears, and spun the pedals to make sure everything was running smoothly. Sarah watched him, a quiet smile on her face. The air between them felt lighter now, the awkwardness replaced by a comfortable familiarity. They talked about school, about friends, about the upcoming summer. They laughed, they joked, and they simply enjoyed each other's company. As Mark worked, he found himself noticing things about Sarah that he hadn't seen before. The way her hair caught the sunlight, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the way she moved with a newfound grace and confidence. He realized that she wasn't just Sarah anymore. She was Sarah, but different. And he was starting to see her in a new light. He was still unsure about what the future held, but he knew that he valued her friendship, and that he was curious to see where this new dynamic would lead. The bike chain now gleamed, freshly oiled and perfectly fitted. Mark carefully lowered the bike from the stand, spinning the pedals to ensure everything was working smoothly. The wheels turned freely, the chain whirred quietly, and the gears shifted with a satisfying click. He was proud of his work. "All right," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "all fixed. Good as new." He stood back, admiring his handiwork. "Want to take it for a spin?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Definitely." She grabbed her helmet and hopped on the bike, adjusting the seat and handlebars. She took off down the driveway, her hair flowing in the breeze. She turned around, a wide smile on her face. "It feels great, Mark." "Thanks." Mark watched her, his heart doing a little flip. He couldn't deny that he was starting to see her differently. She was still Sarah, but she was also so much more. She was confident, independent, and beautiful. And he was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, he wanted more than just friendship. He knew that he still needed time to process everything, to figure out how he truly felt. But he also knew that he didn't want to let this opportunity pass him by. He wanted to get to know this new Sarah, to explore the possibilities, and to see where this unexpected turn of events might lead. He had a feeling that things were about to get a whole lot more interesting. "So," Mark said, walking towards her, "about that bike ride." He paused, a playful glint in his eyes. "I mean, as friends, of course." Sarah laughed, a bright and cheerful sound that made his heart skip a beat. "Of course, as friends," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "Unless, you're thinking about changing the terms of the agreement?" Mark chuckled. "Maybe," he said, shrugging. "But first, I think we should get to know each other a little better. You know, the adult version of Sarah." They talked for a long time, sitting on the steps of her porch, sharing stories, and laughing about old memories. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Mark learned about Sarah's plans for college, her passion for photography, and her desire to travel the world. Sarah learned about Mark's ambitions to open his own bike shop, his love for nature, and his secret talent for playing the guitar. As they talked, the gap between them seemed to shrink, the years of seeing her as a little sister fading away. They discovered that they had more in common than they had ever realized. They shared a similar sense of humor, a love for adventure, and a deep appreciation for the simple things in life. Mark found himself drawn to Sarah's intelligence, her kindness, and her infectious enthusiasm. He realized that he was falling for her, and he was falling hard. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, Mark stood up. "So," he said, a smile playing on his lips, "about that bike ride, are you still up for it?" Sarah grinned. "Are you kidding? I've been waiting all afternoon." She hopped on her bike, adjusting her helmet. Where should we go? Mark thought for a moment. There's a new trail down by the river, he said. It's supposed to be really beautiful, especially at sunset. He paused, then added with a wink, and it's the perfect place for a romantic bike ride. I mean, a friendly bike ride. Sarah laughed. A friendly bike ride it is, she said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. She pushed off, leading the way down the street. Mark followed close behind, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knew that this was just the beginning, that there was still a lot to figure out. But he was excited about the possibilities, about the chance to explore this new relationship with Sarah, and to see where their journey would take them. He just hoped he didn't fall off his bike from all the excitement. He caught up to her, and they rode side by side, the setting sun painting the sky with vibrant colors. The air was filled with the sweet scent of honeysuckle, and the sounds of crickets chirping in the distance. It was a perfect evening, a perfect moment, and Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism for the future. They rode along the riverbank, the setting sun casting long shadows on the water. The trail was smooth and easy, perfect for a leisurely ride. They passed other cyclists, joggers, and families enjoying the beautiful evening. As they rode, they continued to talk, sharing their thoughts and feelings, their hopes and dreams. Mark told Sarah about his grandfather, who had taught him everything he knew about bikes, and about his dream of opening his own shop. Sarah told Mark about her plans for college, her desire to study photography, and her ambition to travel the world. They stopped at a scenic overlook, gazing at the breathtaking view of the river and the surrounding landscape. The sky was ablaze with color, a masterpiece of nature's artistry. They stood in silence for a moment, simply enjoying the beauty of the moment. Then, Sarah turned to Mark, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "For fixing my bike, and for everything." Mark smiled. "You're welcome," he said. "It was my pleasure." He reached out and gently took her hand. "So," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what do you say we make this a regular thing?" Sarah squeezed his hand, her smile widening. "I'd like that very much," she replied. And with that, they turned their bikes around and rode off into the sunset, hand in hand, ready to embark on a new adventure together. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it, together. The bike ride was just the beginning. As they pedaled into the sunset, 1,000 possibilities stretched before them. Would they become a couple? Would they remain friends? Only time would tell. The next day, Mark found a small bouquet of sunflowers on his doorstep. Attached was a note that simply said, "Thanks for the ride, Sarah." He smiled, knowing that this was just the first chapter in a new and exciting story. Maybe they would go to college together, maybe they would travel the world. Maybe they would open a bike shop and photography studio side by side. Or maybe they would simply remain friends, supporting each other through thick and thin. Whatever the future held, Mark knew that he would always cherish the memory of that sunny afternoon, the broken bike chain, and the unexpected confession that had changed everything. He knew that he would never forget the moment when he had dropped the wrench, and the moment when he had realized that Sarah was no longer just a little girl, but a beautiful and amazing woman. As he looked up at the sky, a single star twinkling in the twilight, he felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over him. He was ready for whatever the future held, as long as he had Sarah by his side. He picked up his guitar, sat on his porch, and began to play a sweet and gentle melody, a song of hope, of love, and of new beginnings. And somewhere, down the street, Sarah smiled, knowing that their story had just begun.